Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to go over a question from a client about how they can mitigate some trouble regarding balcony doors and the gasketing, in particular the door shoes that are on those doors. And let's dive in and take a look. It's a lengthy email and I wanted to give it the proper dissection, so let's just capture it as it goes. So let's move on to the screen view and let's take a closer look at what the client's problem is and what proposed solutions are. All right, before we dive into the email that's here, let's quickly just scan the photos that the client sent. Got some damage on the jamb. Looks like it's just a metal clad door. I'm not sure what they're showing us with this rule that's there. Probably referring to problems with the damage. Door swings in. Damage to the door. Yeah, you know, it's difficult to go back in after the fact and repair stuff. Very cool. Just hanging out. Happy hour supervisor. All right, so we've got something happening here. We've got a substantially fatigued door bottom, but this is unusual. This door bottom might just simply be L-shaped, but it's got a bump-up style functionality to it, so that's interesting. I've not seen that one yet. A couple more images. Yeah, okay, so it's L-shaped with a bump-up style. And yeah, that outer edge must be sealing in here somewhere. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge to cure the problem, in the sense that if this is what we're dealing with, it could be that the client has a very small amount of margin here. A very small amount. Because the sealing's being done here. And if that's the case, and we're going to get to the email in a moment, what I don't like about this idea, I can tell you, is that where's your line of defense? Well, you're almost on the inside of the door by the time it stops the rain. So ideally, you want to protect out here. The trouble is, this is an in-swinging door, and therefore you're dragging a sweep over the threshold, rug, shoes that are left here, etc. Hello, Richard. Thank you for the time. You suggested I follow up with photos. I will try to be as descriptive, comprehensive as possible below, so that you can, following the inverse principle of question and answer length. I'm unfamiliar with that scientific principle, but we sure want to give a good answer rather than brief, because the questions are long. As I mentioned in yesterday's call, I'm trying to purchase the best possible door sweep for our balcony door. This is for a condo balcony on the 3rd floor, accessible without need of a ladder or scaffolding. You'll see the entire door in image 5869. Yeah. Okay. Our balcony door has rotted along the bottom 2 inches of the interior wood frame. You will see rot in those photos. We noticed that. There is also associated rot on the bottom 2 inches of the edge of the door itself along the hinge side. Having watched a few of your videos, I believe the rot may be due to the low quality sweep that is currently installed. For what it's worth, this is a Novatech door, a Quebec-based company. It was purchased by the previous owner and was already long ago installed when we move in. Yeah, no doubt. You can tell the door is not new. Let's just see if we can find anyone called Novatech. Novatech Group. Novatech patio doors, probably. Products. That's probably an entry door, would be my guess. Okay, so a residential manufacturer doors. Sure, looks really nice. All good. Let's move on. My novice assessment is that the door sweep, which has started to separate from the underside of the door, is now acting as a water reservoir, effectively forming a 1 millimeter deep channel for water to collect along the length of the door, the bottom of the door. The previous owner had installed felt pads in the exact locations where I found the current rot on the wooden frame. Presumably these felt pads were initially installed to minimize winter drafts, but when I found them last week, they were sodden, and the wood under them had long ago rotten. My layman's diagnosis is that the rot is a result of the failed door sweep pooling up with the water, which then pours out the edges on either side of the failed sweep, turned reservoir where some of the water was then wicked up by the felt. Yeah, probably. I mean, felt, pile, that stuff shouldn't wick. It's not very effective weather stripping if it wicks. My guess is that it does to a very slight extent, but just the moisture staying there, which then saturated and caused the underlying wood to rot. I'm hoping that a higher quality door sweep will guide the water away from the door frame and down the threshold. The door is 1 3/4 thick, metal plated over exterior with a wood interior. Yeah, we'd call that a metal clad door, very typical in residential applications. The current door sweep is shown. The current threshold is shown. Yeah, we looked at that. Okay, so again, the problem that the client has is their line of defense. Imagine if you took the scrimmage line in football and then put it 1 inch off of the nose of the quarterback. That's where the problem's going to be. I know my Canadian friend is going to get that because they love sports up in Canada. All sports. Questions. In Reese, would the correct option be the DB595? I'm automatically going to have trouble with anything other than what the client already has. And it's because I suspect DB595. Sure, I love this idea, but what I was about to say was I suspect that the trouble is the fact that when this door closes, there's probably really a small amount of gap because of this bump up function that's happening. So what I'm trying to say is that threshold is probably like this. We're going to really exaggerate it. And the door comes in here. That door bottom is doing this. And this is where the seal is. That's the problem. That's what I'm expecting the problem to be. So the client wants to come in with that DB595. I love that idea. The issue is, does he have enough room for all of that to happen? So the question becomes what is the clearance? Clearance is defined as the bottom of the door to the top of whatever it is you're sealing over. Concrete, a threshold, whatever it is. So that's the dimension that we just simply don't know. Now what I love about the DB595, specifically the one I selected, DB595, it's a door bottom, they're 595. D is the color, but U is polyurethane. This polyurethane is the most impervious to fatigue and failure of any insert, period, end of sentence. No manufacturer other than Reese uses polyurethane. If you can use polyurethane, use it every single time. It doesn't tear, it doesn't rip, it doesn't rot, it doesn't succumb to the exposure to ultraviolet, which is daylight. It doesn't permit mildew, fungus, things of that nature. So anything polyurethane is a great idea. Is there any other Reese model that you would recommend we consider? For example, the 597, or is the vinyl insert in that one incompatible with our threshold? Yeah, so again, it just really becomes, what's the clearance? So I don't know. A 597. Yeah, so this is pile, and because of the constrained clearance area, the client might be relegated to something like this. That could be what you're dealing with. If the idea is to not replace the threshold, and obviously it's not, yeah, you might be relegated to something like this. The pile is not very effective for water. It's not going to prevent it from being driven away. Pile is most effective actually with insects, but it's very soft. It doesn't present a substantial amount of resistance to the closing action of a door. And finally, again, clearance might be why you go with a 597. Do we need an additional rain drip? So the two models we've looked at incorporate a drip cap. You want that all the time on exterior doors. And I'll even take that a step further. Well, the door is quite deeply inset, so that's not a big deal. If this was not inset, I would recommend, if this is the wall and the client's door is in here, I would recommend a drip cap out here. That's the Reese 201? R201? Yeah, R201. So I would recommend this drip cap at the header. This is far too great of a projection for the bottom of the door. And that, what I just said, far too great of a projection, really answers the question about an additional drip cap. There's really nowhere to put an additional drip cap on this opening. Now, when you have this type of application, you've got your door, and then you have your jamb. We'll just draw it on one side only. That door bottom is going to run all the way long. You'll have to go in and notch the drip cap for this area. You'll have to literally go in and notch it over so that you can actually get it installed. So that's the answer to the drip cap question. In Pemco, would the 216 be our best option for a shoe with a rain drip? Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike this. The issue is I don't think there's any screws on this side. Some people complain that it's too loose out here. You might have to drill through. I like the thermally broken principle because there's no metal touching each other. Plan to have to screw that there. Again, the issue becomes, do you have the clearance? It's really going to be, do you have the clearance? I'm going to go with, if you've got the clearance for Reese and the model you want that's compatible with your clearance is in polyurethane, that's a hands down go with Reese polyurethane. Do you recommend thermally broken? Yeah, thermally broken in any climate is really a good idea. I have witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of thermally broken thresholds, frames. It's always a great idea if you can get it. How do we know if we need the notch option? You absolutely need the notch option because you're mounting it on the push side of the door. Would the 223 and 2211 work equally well? Yeah. Again, brush. Is this brush? Yeah, this is brush. Not going to be great for driven rain, but what I'm loving about this is your line of defense is right here, and your margin might be compatible. Again, boils down to clearance. The problem with this is you're going to drag this across the top of your threshold and anything on the inside of the opening. That's going to be the problem with this, and in fact, any door bottom. Let's go... Now, they said the 2211. Yeah, you've got, I was going to mention that as well. You've got some damage on the doors that this may help you seal that up to a certain extent. It might not. When I think of these extended door bottoms, I don't often think of Pemco. I think of National Guard for some strange reason. But yeah, if you want to cover up some of this, sure, you can. Obviously go with dark bronze. I would go with... Well, Pemco would be okay for that. Their dark bronze is darker than Reese's. But at the same time, that door bottom is not going to protect the edge of the door. And, there's no damage out here. So I don't know that I would invite a really big profile of door bottom there. I just don't see what advantages it's giving you, is the bottom line. It's just more hardware. It's a mini little kick plate, I suppose, but I don't see the direct advantage. Thank you very much. Don't want to take your time. Confirming we have correctly identified the source of water intrusion. Removing all rotted wood. Oh, so these are the steps the client's going to go through to repair. Yeah, water. Stop the water. Removing all rotted wood and door frames in the door edge. Replace with pressure-treated wood and epoxy. Yeah, that's probably not an awful idea, but that's... At the end of the day, what does this door cost? What I'm trying to say is these doors are not expensive. So you could buy a door, have a hole cut in it, reuse your light kit, or just call Novatech and say, I want a new door. So that's an option as well. Now, if you're game to make this a project, what you could do, my friends at Northfield, they have a tool called the Stylizer. I don't have it in the site. I own one. I just don't have it in the site. What you could do is, it might be difficult to do this because of the construction of the door. You'd have to look. Door machinery. Stylizer. This is a base that you install. I don't know if it comes with a router. It might. For $300, I'm sure it does not come with a router. And then you do this sort of mortise to the bottom of the door. I really suppose it's just a giant dado. I'm not sure why we're not able to make that larger. Let's copy that. So what this tool does is, and I've used this scores, hundreds of times, you could go in and do that whole little pocket in here. Then you can come back with your, I wouldn't use pressure treated wood and epoxy. I would use type 2 exterior glue and structural lumber is what I would personally use. Timber strand, or LSL it's called. It's very impervious to water. So you could consider that. Get rid of all of that wood that's bad, but that's making it a project. You know, can you do it without a stylizer? You can, but you're going to end up making some sort of a fixture for your router. At the end of the day, this door should not be that expensive. It just shouldn't be. Sanding, painting, replacing any weather stripping that has failed, absolutely. Recaulking any failed caulk. Installing a new shoe with integrated drip bar. Right. So at the end of the day, the data that I don't know is what is the clearance, and that's going to dictate what is done. So what is, again, this dimension? What are we dealing with? Then you go accordingly. Drip cap, absolutely every single time. The issue with that is you might be dragging stuff over, or you may not have the clearance. Now, let me show you a couple of ideas. I don't know if they're going to work. Okay, so there is a sweep that is mounted on the outside, and every time you open the door, there's a spring that kicks this back up. And every time you close the door, it hits that pin in the jamb. I like this idea because it lifts up and out of the way. That's why I like this idea. The downside of this idea is there's no function to drip cap. This has an overall height of 2.5. I suppose you could bring one here and over as a secondary precaution. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't do that. That's an idea. Here's another idea. I do really like the idea of, here's your exterior door, swings in. So where's the water coming from? It's coming from out here. It's getting to an undesirable location. What I would think that you should consider doing is, because we're really addressing the where is the water coming from problem, well, the problem is there's nothing stopping the water. The weather stripping that's installed, it's too late. It's just too late by the time, and this is fatigued to begin with. The water's already in the, it's breached. It's already in the rabbit. So what I'm thinking is out here, that's where you got to put some weather stripping. Reese has some interlock. I like how Pemco's catalog shows it, so I'm going to use this catalog. Okay. Put that on your jams and your header. I believe Carl Weathers' line from Arrested Development was, now you got a stew. So that could be really interesting to have this material installed. Also gives you an integrated functionality of latch guard against someone loiding your latch bolts. You can go with something more typical, which is just surface mounted perimeter gasketing. What I like about this stuff is you'll miter it at the intersection between the header and the jams. You want to make sure that the thickness doesn't get in the way of your existing hardware, like your rosettes. So you want to make sure, sometimes there are jobs when we do sound transmission control gasketing and it's really thick and it interferes with the lock set. So I like that stuff. And then, of course, replacing what's already there. And what we're talking about really is a belt and suspenders approach. And then you could also consider an automatic door bottom. Automatic door bottoms, you can easily find me blabbing on about them incessantly. Basically, when you close the door, it's mounted on the outside. This is what you're going to see from the outside. Every time you close the door, the bottom drops. So that's an automatic way for you to get a seal. And it's an automatic way, and it would go right here, basically. Every time the door opens, it snaps back up, so you glide over what's here. So again, belt and suspenders. Get something here. Get something here. This is where you want your line of defense to be. Get something mounted so that you're sealing on the face of it here. You've got some seal here, right here, it's just not working. The if you're going to get into replacing, you're going to want to replace the dust pads that are there, which is what we call those. I would definitely put something back there. In fact, you might even consider something longer. There is a, yeah. There's going to be some self-adhesive material. This item here, I can sell you the insert only with self-adhesive. So it's pile, it'll crush down really well, even though that's really not the point. So yeah, you're going to want to replace those dust pads that we just mentioned. Automatic door bottom. Again, you know, I would probably shy away from that only because it's going to interrupt perimeter gasketing, and I really think you need to have perimeter gasketing happening on this opening. Interlocking, it's hard to shut it down better than that, and that's going to work out really well. Okay. All right, let's wrap up this video on camera. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. So, just a word about drip caps. They're amazingly effective. They're so effective that it's hard to describe how effective they are when used at the header and at the bottom of the door. Drip caps should be standard equipment every single time. No questions asked. No discussing it, because they're so effective. A lot of solutions in play. I do believe it's a belt and suspenders approach. When you have commercial doors that have to be egress compliant, they have to be fire rated, you sometimes when you belt and suspender it, now the door just doesn't close right. There's so much happening. But you are always going to be pushing your door closed and locking it. You're always going to be pulling your door closed and locking it. So if it's a little tighter fit, it's not going to be a problem. Every time you pull it closed, you're going to say to yourself, that's a good seal. That's sealed really well. So, you know, the other concept is if you're selling the house, yeah, you got to stop the water. You got to fix the damage. You're going to do that no matter what. But maybe don't go belt and suspenders. If you're staying there, absolutely. Stop that water dead in its tracks. I'm from Chicago, so I know what inclement weather is like. I've been to Canada, so I know what inclement weather is like. And yeah, if you're not protecting yourself against it, it's coming in. That's for sure. Line of defense on the outside every single time. Underneath the door, that's where your rot's going to happen. I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you. Okay, so the client placed an order. It's 1 or 2 weeks later down the road. So let's go over what the client ordered and then some follow-up questions that the client has for us. So let's do that right now. So there are, I think 4 or 5 line items on the order. The first thing that the client ordered is the Reese door shoe with extender, or the drip cap, and a polyurethane insert. So that's a great choice. Going with a dark bronze finish. Reese's dark bronze is the best dark bronze in the business when it comes to gasketing, weather stripping. It has the drip cap. Great choice for an exterior door that's getting moisture directly on it. And polyurethane, the best in the business as well when it comes to abrasion resistance. So the client has some questions here, and let's go through them. I spoke with the client at length regarding notching the drip cap. Okay, so let's take a look at this. And it's obviously ideal to not use another manufacturer's resources for explaining something from the first manufacturer. And what we'll do is we'll open up the Pemco catalog and we'll take a look at, I know that they have a description in here of what the notch looks like. There are certainly different things that can be notched. Thresholds. There we go. Yeah, so this is the notch that I'm thinking that the client's going to need. What's called a half notch. And this is what it would need to look like. And the client's not sure. The client's question is, how much do I need to notch for the inserted Q-Lon weather stripping? And one of the original images from the client gives us an idea that they've got some inserted gasketing here. Well, the notch doesn't really have anything to do with the face of the seal coming out, but it has to do with the projection of the stop. So the dimension from this surface here would be called the rabbet. This surface here would be the stop. So the distance between this point and this point is what you would have to notch for. So let's take a look at what that might look like. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. So the question in this not to scale drawing is how to notch for the drip cap. The issue is, obviously, here are our jambs. Here is our door. Okay. Awesome. Now, the Q-line is going to sit in this area here. The door bottom is going to run here. The door bottom is going to run all the way here. The drip cap is going to normally run all the way out to the end of the unit. What you want to do is notch it to here. So what you need to order is, ideally, in a perfect world, and I'm not saying that it's a perfect world, I didn't make the rules, I just live in the world, is you order the door bottom the actual length of the door. Pardon me, the actual width. You then take the dimension from the rabbet, which is here, to the face of the stop, here. So net door width is your order size, and then you're going to subtract, I'm sorry, I drew that wrong. You're going to come to the end of the door. This is the thinking. So you go to the door itself, and you deduct how much room that stop is going to take up. But the issue is this. You're going to order the unit the net door width. But then, standing on the outside of the opening, you're going to measure the distance between the stops. Right, from here to here. Okay, so you're going to take the net door width, you're going to subtract this distance between the stops, and you're going to realize that that's how much you have to notch it back. But then you're going to add about a 1/16 of an inch, is what you'll do. So if you're going to order this a net width of 36 inch, and this is 1/2 inch, you need to have a 1/2 inch notch here. But I would make it 9/16 so that there was a small margin between the door face, so my notch is really going to look like that. Okay, I have a 1/16 of an inch in here. So that's how I would go about ordering the dimension of the notch. Now the question is can you do it in the field? Yeah, of course. I don't know that aviation snips or snips, as the client mentioned, would be appropriate, because that's probably going to deform the material. You're probably going to want to carefully cut it with a saw, but I would suggest that we get that dimension and that we have the factory do it and just pay them the amount of money it takes to do it. I don't know what that is, so let me know what that notch dimension is, and then we'll reprice that is what we'll do. Okay, let's talk about the next item on the list. While we're talking about the items, the client does want me to provide stainless steel self-tapping screws, and I gave the client for self-tappers and self-drilling screws. There's definitely a difference there. Tapping screws. So this is a self-tapping screw, pointed. That's self-drilling. It has a drill point on it. It has a mini drill bit on it. Some people say, I need them self-tappers. They're not going to tap the hole, and I don't know the origin of why it's called self-tapping, except that they do cut threads as they go in, but it's not like a tapped hole. So self-tapping screws don't do the drilling. So the client wants self-tappers, and we're going to do a pointed screw. We're going to do a pan head would be typical for this. It is a number, probably a 2 or maybe a 1. I'm going to leave that blank. Let's see. We want stainless. And I did let the client know that black is not available, or dark bronze, so the client's okay with stainless, just the stainless look. I sure like the 316 stainless. It's the most robust in terms of corrosion resistance. Threads per inch I don't really care about. These are just going to be self-tapping screws, basically for sheet metal. And you'll note that it was a number 6 by 5/8, which is here. So we know we're going to need probably 4 screws for that. So number 6 by 5/8. I'm going to leave that there as a tab to remind me of what we need. So that's the door bottom. Then the client ordered a drip cap. This is just going to go at the header over the doorway. Not a big deal. Let's pull in an image from the original conversation. And I'm not really sure where they're going to install it, but it would normally go up here. There's quite an inset there, but that drip cap will look really nice up there. I'll tell you, ideally, I would be ordering it this dimension, and I'm going to bring that to the client's attention. Okay, so a drip cap. Let's see what screws this takes. 6 by 5/8. Okay, we're good there. The next item was a piece of Q-Lon, Q-Lon type, a curved-in gasket, and then a couple of those for the jam, and then one for the header, and then perimeter gasketing. So the client is going to do a belt and suspenders approach on this, and these also take 6 by 5/8 pad head screws, so that's good. We'll have plenty of screws for the client by getting one box of 100 6 by 5/8 self-drilling 316 stainless, super corrosion resistant. Client's got a 42-inch piece there, and that's all. So I'm not sure where that's going. Meaning, I don't know what the plan is with where are the other pieces. So we're going to ask the client about the width of the drip cap and then the quantity of the 778Ds. And yeah, sometimes visualizing something in AutoCAD is pretty easy to do, and there we go. I will update this video as we get more information. Thank you. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. We received a response from the client regarding what they were using that unorthodox list of material for, and we have some clarification. So let's move on and read what the client has provided us. Okay, thank you for your quick and comprehensive response. Regarding the two pieces of 42-inch 778D, you are correct that those lengths don't dimensionally match anything logical, intuitive on the door. Okay, so a couple of pieces of soffit mounted perimeter gasketing, 42-inch. Okay, right. We had a very large Floridian grade rain last week, and I had a good opportunity to observe the door's performance in rain. As you may remember, my door has a problematic threshold where the seal is quite far back in the jamb, allowing water to get in. And what the client, again, is referring to is that they've got a threshold condition here. And the issue is, I think like the door is here, and the door bottom is mounted like that. And, you know, by the time it gets here, water's halfway through. I think that's kind of what the plan was, for the idea. So when the client was getting this heavy rain, what I saw in the rain is that the overhang of the aluminum transom, under which the door is recessed, let's go back to the client's original images. Yeah, there's quite a bit of this door being inset or overhang, the client's using the term. Yeah, great. Awesome. Okay. What I saw in the rain is that the overhang of the aluminum transom, under which the door is recessed, completely protects the top 2/5 or so of the door. So the top 40% of the door, so that's a lot of the door. even in a direct driving rain, that top half of the door stays completely dry. That's not Floridian grade then, because horizontal rain is going to get all of it wet. And the once every 10 years where there's going to be a real driving rain, I just can't see not completely sealing this. So what the client's doing on these 42-inch pieces, they're literally saying, all I'm doing is putting it here, here, and here. I'm not worried about up here or up here. And the client states cost. Well, I get it. It's just the client's already inherited the cost because of some straight length Q-line. So that's really not an appropriate way to not spend money, because you're not spending any more money except on the material alone. And it's hard to argue to not actually seal the door. And what we could do, and I've done it many, many times, is we could order, I think this client's door is 8 foot tall. If it is, what I would do is I would order two, 50-inch lengths. I would order 5 50-inch lengths. 2 50s for each side and 1 for the header, and just cut it down. Keep life easy. And then I would instruct Reese to send the polyurethane as a continuous roll. So while the aluminum may not be continuous, the insert would be continuous. That would be my recommendation. That fact, plus the fact that the 42-inch length seemed to present a very important pivot point in terms of shipping costs. Yeah, once you get past 36-inch, that shipping cost explains why I have selected such an odd combo of two 42-inch lengths. I figured I don't strictly need weather stripping along the sheltered top of the door, and this gentleman's in Canada, so if it's not driving rain, it's going to be the actual reality of single-digit temperatures. And based on the effect of the recess, meaning how much the door is inset or the overhang, I similarly don't seem to strictly need it along the upper 2/5. Finally, since it is a private balcony, the solution can be ugly so long as it's functional. My cost-conscious calculation was to get as much weather stripping as possible without nudging the shipping costs up too high. I know it will look weird, and I know that full weather stripping along at a minimum both sides would make sense, but I can't figure out a way to do that without tripwiring the shipping cost to be suddenly too high for our budget. Well, you order the shorter lengths and then the continuous insert would be my suggestion. Those in the rain observations also explain the odd length of drip cap. Not only is the bottom half exposed to direct rain, but there is an awful lot of splashback amplified by some tunnel-like dysfunction of the cornice from the above roof, which means that a lot of the water hitting the door is actually secondhand water. It's absolutely it is. The majority of water hitting a door is always secondhand water. It's not hitting it from driving rain. Rain generally falls vertically. So bouncing off the balcony deck right in front of it. It also lands very low on the door. My plan, ugly as it may be, is to affix the R201D quite close to the bottom, right along the door, right above the door shoe. That's going to be less than ideal. The projection of this is 2.5 inch. So I think what the client is wanting to do, install it down here. The issue is at 2.5 inch projection, you'll have the door bottom with its drip cap here, and then the client's saying he's going to put that R201 over it. My concern is that you're going to have to take the R201 and cut it back so that it will clear the soffit of the frame. Plus, I really think it's going to hang off quite a bit, meaning someone's going to know it if they stub their foot on that. Open the door partially, you swing your right foot out to walk out, and all of a sudden you've hit a 2.5 inch projection piece of aluminum. I would be really tempted to put that on with, I wouldn't put it there at all. It's going to be an obstacle for the average user. If it was me in my house, I could do it because I would be mindful of not hitting it, but that doesn't mean that others would know it's there. So he's going to install the R201 quite close at the bottom, right above the door shoe, in hopes of creating an even more hermetic ledge to block water access to that feeble threshold, and in hopes of diverting away all the rainwater running down the door's face from the bottom half of the door that does receive direct rainfall. I got the idea from this illustration. Yeah, I mean, I see it there. You tell me the number of times that people have installed this successfully, and I'll tell you the number of times that someone has complained about it being an obstacle. This is thoroughly unrealistic. I've never seen it installed this way. And I'm quite concerned about, you know, the substantial reduction in the usable door width when that door's open to 90 degree. Yeah. It's different for an outswing door, obviously. I maintain what I said. I still wouldn't put it there. If I was this client, I wouldn't put it there. I would also put it there maybe with two-sided tape, just temporarily to see if it got knocked off. I acknowledge that this is not door orthodox and that it will not be aesthetically appealing, but as long as I can keep my son from kicking setting on the lowered drip bar, I think it presents our most pragmatic solution given the circumstances. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you're aware of the projection, and you're going to hopefully make sure that it doesn't get damaged, or etc. And even more importantly, if we did implement the above, wouldn't we have to notch our two drip caps to accommodate the Reese 778D? Yes, you're going to need to notch them back for the gasketing. That's what I meant to say in my last email, but he wrote PEMCO Q102, right? If you recall, we had to explain that you wouldn't notch for this. I believe that when we spoke, you had said that the exterior weather stripping has right of way, and that any drip caps are notched to accommodate. So would I add the Reese 778 measurement to my projection of the stop? The answer is yes. Absolutely. Absolutely would. Yes, 778D. Yeah. So whatever this projection is, that drip cap will have to get notched in this area. So, yeah, 3/8. Okay, that is everything for the client. I will send them a response, and we'll wait for verification of how they want us to proceed, and we'll do so accordingly. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Okay, we have more information from the client, so let's switch to the screen view and let's take a look. Okay, so the client says, I can't completely picture the continuous roll for the 778, and basically all that is the aluminum holders are going to be shipped in the lengths that the client wants, but the polyurethane insert is not going to be cut to those lengths. So if the client orders 5 pieces at 4 foot each, he's going to get a total of 20 feet in a continuous roll of the polyurethane. That's what that means. Because I haven't actually seen the product in person and didn't imagine that it was pliable. But if I understand correctly, you're basically saying that if I order 5 lengths, and then you can coordinate with Reese in such a way that it won't drastically change the shipping cost, which it won't change it at all, though it obviously brings our material cost higher. That sounds like a great plan, so if it's feasible, let's do it. The most logical assortment from our end would be 2 at 44 and 3 at 36. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. This will allow us to fully seal the sides and the top. If it's possible for you to modify your order to reflect that, that'd be fantastic. Because the door stop jamb has right around the altitude of the door shoe, and because my father-in-law and I are yet to replace that wood, I think it would probably be most prudent for us to notch all drip caps on site. I completely agree. There are just too many variables. Newly installed wood, newly installed kerf, newly installed weather stripping, lack of a client's understanding of what it would take to do that, the potential for the manufacturer to get it wrong, even by a 1/16 of an inch would be problematic, not having the right tool to do the job in terms of the custom size by the manufacturer. And I'm worried we'll get something wrong if we cut before having the chance to measure this in situ. He has the full shelf of home equipment tools. Good for him. He's probably very popular when something breaks, and if he's gracious with his time, then he's a bigger man than I. I'm thinking we'll use a combo hacksaw on file and avoid the snips per your advice about them possibly bending the metal. If you have any other suggestions for home notching, please let me know. You know, I really don't, in the sense that when they notch this material at the factory, they've got a tool meant for doing it. And it's probably going to be in a die, a press and a die. The issue is any sort of cutting is going to deform the metal. Any sort of grinding is tough because aluminum doesn't grind very well. Aluminum is really tenacious because of, I wouldn't say elastic, but it gums up very easily and fouls your grinding wheel or fouls your CNC mill. And the trouble is the heat. I found when CNC milling aluminum, you've got to get your feeds and speeds really accurate to move at the correct speed, at the correct RPM, and certainly the pass depth for what you're doing, and lubrication is really important. So at the end of the day, how I would do it is I would have the factory do it every single time. I wouldn't try to cut the aluminum at all. However, if I was forced to do it, I would indeed use a hacksaw. I would use a very small tooth count appropriate for cutting aluminum. I would probably use a very thin kerf, and I would probably use a very long frame so that I could cut very nice and straight. The issue is always cutting the face of the drip away from the face of the unit itself. You know, the other problem with cutting it, well, whether you do it or the factory does it, is you're going to expose that underlying aluminum base material. So I would prefer not to do it in the field, only because the job's not going to look nearly as good as it professionally done at the factory. Okay, so the client wants a revised invoice. So what I'm going to do is build a quote for everything that's been discussed. Basically, all we're doing is we're adding the 7/7/8 and then the continuous roll of the insert only, and we're adding the self-tapping stainless steel screws. I will do that, send it to the client, and report back. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.